Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting back into another one of our financial trending topics from the perspective of men and women. This one is the perspective of women, and I think it's actually a very interesting one. So in this one, and do not mind you guys, read off some notes on my computer, and we're going to dive into this discussion. So getting started, the topic is funding modern family planning and reproductive health. Now, this is very interesting because as we dive into this, one thing I'm going to say is this: it's really hitting on the fact of traditional family dynamics. And I mentioned this on the channel before, are fading away. So it's interesting to look up this topic and find out that this is a trending topic that women kind of have as one of their top 5 in discussions in terms of finances, because it shows that not only is the modern family structure that at least most people in America know of it to be, 2 people get married, 2.5 kids, the whole, buying a house, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff, staying old to your grandparents' age, is not only is that something that's fading, but this topic shows that the mindset is we're locking it out completely because we're planning around it not existing. So it's interesting from that perspective, not kind of saying what's wrong or right, but that this is a topic that women are having their discussions, and it shows that it solidifies that things will probably never be the same ever again. So jumping into the details of it, family planning looks radically different than it did a generation ago. Whether it's delaying childbirth for career stability, pursuing IVF, which is like an in vitro type of, I forget what it breaks down to, opting for egg freezing, or navigating adoption, reproductive health care is a massive financial line item. Women are increasingly treating family planning not just as medical decisions, but as a major financial goal that requires years of aggressive saving and strategic insurance navigation. So, and I'm going to jump right into the key points: the rising cost of fertility treatments and how to advocate for reproductive benefits in corporate compensation packages. Wow, I wasn't expecting that in the key points. So one, the fact that they're even advocating that jobs to have to now include that into a package goes to a whole nother level of things. But once again, it solidifies the fact that the quote unquote traditional family building, I just use that term lightly. If some people felt that is traditional, some people may not have, but for the most part, a lot of people consider that to be traditional, is pretty much gone. It's definitely one of those things that is very fleeting. People don't even want to get married these days. So it's definitely something that's kind of gone. When it comes to navigating it financially, I think it's very interesting because it's a new burden. It's a new weight that was never really a thing before. Usually it was things for, people might have had certain health issues. It'd be things they have to navigate, but it was never part of the primary discussion, because most people back in the days, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, would just go and have kids, get married somewhere between the age of 20 to 25. You would have kids. You would just go throughout your life. You do what you had to do. You understood this value of family structure. You just stayed with it. So you didn't have this mentality like, I'm alone, which is where this is coming from, perspective of being alone, not so much of a perspective of a couple's, because obviously if you were a couple, I don't think people would be talking so much about these procedures unless they're looking at it from a perspective of they're older and then now they're getting with someone as a couple. But in that case, I think that it's definitely a little bit different. That's a more specialized case, and it wouldn't be a primary topic that comes up unless this was something actively that people who are younger. As a matter of fact, the search was from 20 to 40, people in their 20 to 40, that prime age of our working stage of our life. And so those are the ones who are thinking about this. So with that being said, it's definitely something that has a lot of weight to it, I would say, in terms of trying to navigate that. It can be a very expensive process, especially because a lot of that process may not even be successful the first time around. Or maybe it comes to an issue of like freezing your eggs. Now you have to freeze your eggs. And at what point, if you're starting your career, so if you freeze your eggs at 30, are you going to keep them frozen until you find somebody that you want to have that with? Because there's whether you're getting a donor or whether you're going to do something where I'm just waiting to find the right partner. So now I'm freezing my eggs. So now it's a new monthly expense that you have in your life that would have never been considered because you're waiting. And when you do that, you have to do it early, because you have to do it when you have good eggs. You don't do it when you're, say, 45, 50 years old, you don't have any good legs left. At that point, you're really doing it from an emergency standpoint. At that point, you're not doing it from the standpoint of, okay, like, I want the best success that I can have at that point. You're just kind of really like, trying to, on the back end, make it work. So let's jump into the actionable angles here. So it says how to build a dedicated fertility slash family planning fund alongside everyday emergency savings. And that is the angle which a person would just, flat out, you could just, like it says there, put out a way to save, make a fund for that. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a little bit sad because the weight of another bill. So let's say that you work your 9 to 5. Let's break this down. I'm not going to break all the financial things down, but let's say you make, we'll say $3,000 a month. Okay. Just throwing out a random number, something that we can kind of work with here. $3,000 a month. Let's say between your rent, between all your expenses, your car note, blah, blah, all these things. Let's say that you're spending about $2,000 a month. And then now let's say, which nowadays places that people live, it's even, more than that. But let's just say $2,000 a month is going to all your expenses, including rent. You have $1,000 left. And we'll say like 500 of that generally is going to your savings, to your some kind of retirement, whatever the case is. I know normally that's built into your 9 to 5 job, but let's say it's not in this case. So $500 goes to your savings, and $500 goes to free money that you're able to spend for the month to have fun. So maybe every weekend you spend $100 or whatever the case is, you're able to have some fun. Like I said, all your expenses are paid from the $2,000. The $500 is your savings. To take the $500 of your spending money for the month and now have to allocate maybe another $300 a month in savings just for the day that happens. And if you have the monthly bill of freezing your eggs in advance, that's chipping into that as it goes along. It's not even a savings. It's now a new monthly bill. That is something that I honestly would say is almost impossible to navigate. And it's not to deter anybody, but I get why this is going to be a question that are on women's minds, because it's something that is almost impossible to navigate. The level of expenses that go into just even preparing for it in general, just putting your eggs away, saving, or getting ready for that moment. And when you get into that space, these things can cost upwards of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 just for a procedure that is not successful. And then now you're like, okay, I got to do it again. And then say if it is successful, if you want more, you got to do it again. So it's a lot. And so with that being said, I definitely would say that I get why it's a key topic, especially with the dating world being in shambles right now. And there's really no coming back from it. Not saying that, what came first, the chicken or the egg, what caused it, this and that, but getting away from that for 1 second. We've done other videos that kind of dive into that space. I would say that regardless of how it got to this state, it creates a financial burden in this area where it's very hard. Now, I will say this as another workaround too, but this kind of muddies the water. And I've mentioned about this before on the channel in the past. One other solution that wouldn't cost as much as this is being able to have an agreement with somebody. You could work this out with 2 people, getting a lawyer. It could be a friend of yours. If it's a female, like I said, it's coming from the perspective of women. So we're going to say, if you're a woman and you have a male that's a friend, and you guys, are neutral friends. This person doesn't like you in that way. It's got to really be a neutral friend. It's not going to work really if it's somebody likes you, but a neutral friend, you have no feelings for them at all. But you guys make an agreement, and you make an agreement to say you're going to have a kid together. You're going to do your separate lives, but you're going to have this kid together. You can write up an agreement. You can go to a lawyer, have an agreement written up, and then that way you guys have a kid, and it's virtually free, whether you're doing it the old-fashioned way or whether you're doing it, by means of some kind of, fertilization, IV stuff type of thing. But nonetheless, and even then it may cost money, but it'll be cheaper than obviously doing the whole process of, I got to take my eggs out. I got to, freeze them. I got to wouldn't have to do all that kind of stuff. But that might be a cheaper way than doing this whole process, but it definitely is a financial burden. That's the best I could really say to it in terms of how to navigate it, other outside of you just making a fund for it. But as I broke down the numbers, it can get very expensive and hard, and it really kind of changes the scope of your life, even making it where some people probably are even saying, do I even want to have kids because of that? I would also say that trying to go back to the traditional, like putting more energy and trying to find a way to do that traditional, I think starts to become a perspective that needs to be addressed, because just on a financial level, it doesn't make sense. I'm not gonna say it doesn't make sense, but I'm gonna say that it's such a burden that it's hard to really say to yourself, I'm gonna go this route of putting away, and say in your entire lifetime, somewhere between $60,000 to maybe $200,000, however much, into this that could have been in itself an investment or retirement, and, like buying property, putting into stocks, or whatever the case is, to where that would accumulate it, and all of a sudden you're like a multimillionaire just from investing that money. But instead you put it into this process, which I'm not saying isn't worth it, because children is an amazing thing, but it's a burden that we traditionally never had to deal with before. And now it's something that obviously women are discussing, and it's a top trending topic for women trying to figure that out. So with that said, you guys put your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. You don't have to say if this is something that you're going through, but if it is and you don't mind sharing, then do so into the comments. And what are your thoughts? As always, you guys, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.